Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Whole Wellness Mama Summit, where we are unlocking the healthiest, less stressed mom in you using strategies from various wellness experts. I am your host, Amy Nesbitt, and I am beyond excited today to sit down with Ned Johnson about how to be non anxious parents to raise self driven kids, because who doesn't want that, right? Ned is a professional tutor geek since 1993, the president of PrepMatters, an educational company that helps students succeed in high school and get into college. He co authored two amazing books: The Self Driven Child, The Science and Sense of Giving Your Kids More Control Over Their Lives, as well as What Do You Say? How to Talk with Kids to Build Motivation, Stress Tolerance, and a Happy Home. He's also the host of the Self-Driven Child podcast, and his work has been featured in so many amazing places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, NPR, BBC, and so many more. I personally have seen him in a few other summits, asked him questions to which he had insightful answers, and most importantly, his kindness and humor just shine through from the first interaction with him. So I knew I wanted him to join me in this summit, and I'm thrilled you said yes. Welcome, Ned.
Well, golly, thank you for that kind introduction, Amy. I'm happy to be with you, and I'm excited for the summit put together because, as you said, who can't use a few more tools? We're all doing our best as parents.
Yeah. So, Ned, for those that don't know you, can you share your quick story of how you came to where you are now?
Sure. My Marvel origin story is really just I'm a tutor. Since 1993, I've spent something like 50,000 hours one-on-one with kids, and I just try to help them do better and learn better and motivate better and perform better, especially in a world that seems to get more and more stressed every year. And we know that being overly stressed does really terrible things for motivation, and it does terrible things for performance. And it sure as heck makes home less fun and enjoying our kids a lot harder. So anything that helps, that gives people, kids and parents, tools to be a little bit less stressed and a little more effective seems like a good idea. And my partner in crime, in Scribe, I guess, is a clinical neuropsychologist named William Stixrud, who spent even more time with young people than I am. Between the two of us, we hope we've gathered together some tools and some tips that will help people be more effective in how help their kids be effective.
That's amazing. I love it. There are a number of terms going around these days for parents, like lawnmower parenting or helicopter parenting, and both of which I think come from this desire of parents to spare their kids of any sort of hardships and pain, which is absolutely a normal desire to have as a parent. And we even make decisions for them in attempts to keep them safe. Can you talk about how that affects our kids?
Yeah, it's funny. Bill actually was given a talk, an interview in Netherlands or Denmark. I can't remember where. And the parenting expert that said, here we use the term curling parents, and they sweep everything out of the way, right? And it's in our wiring to protect our kids, to make things easier for them. And the challenge is short-term gains and long-term pain, right? We want problems now or problems later. And if we're honest, we should remind ourselves that our job is to help our kids learn to run their own lives, including, and perhaps most importantly, learning to solve problems, to fix things when they make mistakes, to learn to tolerate things that are hard. And you don't learn to tolerate hard things unless you deal with or tolerate hard things. And so when we want to be mindful about how, as parents, we jump in and help, and including when we make decisions for them, because good decisions are two things. One that's rooted in emotions, right? In order to sort of organize your life, you really have to know what you want and then say, how do I go about this? And it might be with help from friends, from parents, from teachers, from loved ones. But I really need to think a lot about what it is that I want out of this life and what I'm prepared to do to get it. And when decisions involve a lot of pro con, yes, no, 49 to 51 sort of percentage decisions. And when we do that, it involves a lot of those executive functions that we want kids to have of weighing things and trying to think long terms and what are the ramifications and how do I go down there? And if it doesn't work, how do I back up and solve it? And on it goes. And, from our perspective, particularly for teenagers, the most important, the most powerful lesson that we can give to kids, apart from I'm just crazy about you, is that I have confidence in your ability to make important decisions about your life. And when they don't about your life, and when they don't work out exactly, that you'll figure out what to go from there. My wife, and I hope my mother-in-law won't listen in on this, but my wife says when she was going to college, her mom was dropping her off. Her mom's a lovely person, but golly, is she fretful. And she was perhaps ruminating out loud, and they're driving across country to Massachusetts. My wife swears her mom said to her, "I don't know how you're going to make it through college without me." Oh my. I mean, that's her own fear and her love for her daughter, but golly, what an undermining message. What we instead want to say to kids is, I trust that you can make good decisions. And we want them to be informed decisions, but we don't want to take away decisions for kids. And parents are saying, but this is too important. Well, when will it be less important, right? Once they're actually in college, when they're trying to pick their first job, should I marry this person or not? And these things are rooted in brain development. So I really feel, and we feel very strongly, and we think the brain science backs us up on this, is we don't want to make decisions for kids that they can make for themselves. At the very least, we want to make decisions with them.
That's absolutely all those things. I went, oh my gosh, yes, yes. So I live in Silicon Valley, where
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it's significantly heightened or what, but parents worry a lot about how to give their kids the best possible advantage, right, for their future.
Right, right,
And
right.
those could be things like public versus private school, how many extracurriculars, tutors, how many tutors, how many coaches, all of the things, the list goes on. And I think you already kind of touched upon it, but how can parents go about being this non-anxious parent, or take the parent as consultant model, as you say in the book?
Well,
What that looks like in some of these situations, or in general, perhaps.
yeah, I mean, so there are a few thoughts in there. One, I'm reflecting on a conversation. I was working with this boy some 5, 6 years ago, and actually his mom was an educational consultant, so she was kind of the same space that I'm helping kids make, families make choices about schools. And her son was at one school and wanted him to go to another school, and he was at best ambivalent about this. I should point out this kid was brilliant. In 8th grade, could run circles around me in terms of how fast his brain worked. He was also quite rigid, very, very anxious, and mom was sort of intense in the same kind of way. So he was asking me about, there's a test called the SSAT, which you need to apply, at least into schools in our area at that time. And there was one school they were thinking about. And the test was on Saturday. We were meeting on Thursday. The test was on Saturday, but he was visiting that school the following Tuesday. So he looked at me and said, "Why should I take this test? I don't even know that I want to go to this school." And so I broken my best sort of machine learning. Well, because when we maximize opportunity, when we maximize choices, right, that's a better thing. So you do well on this test, then you'll have the choice, and if you decide you like the school, you can go there. Well, he wasn't really buying and went back and forth, and I think his mother had been really forcing, and so she walks into the office. "You're taking that stupid test on Saturday. That's the end of it. We are taking it." And he just, I mean, oh my goodness. And I said, "Can we have a moment here?" And so I took him out the window and said, "Can you just hang out here for a moment?" And I said, and I brought his mom back in. I said, "It seems to me, if we can force him to go and take this test, but we sure as heck can't make him care. He can just sit there and fill in letters. Here's what I suggest we do. We say, listen, buddy, this is absolutely your choice. Your mom and I have talked about this. If you want to take this test, great. If you don't want to take this test, that's totally up to you." Because obviously we couldn't duct tape the pencil to your number 2 pencil and make you do. We couldn't do that, right? So it's completely up to you. But and it was actually meeting on a Tuesday. I said, "But what I want to do is give you a call on Thursday. And I just want you to tell me what your decision is. And all I'm going to ask is that you explain to me your thinking. And I promise you, I will not try to talk you out of it. Whatever it is, this is your call, because this is your education. This is your life. And you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And it has to be your choice." And so he looked at me and and he's like, okay, he's thinking. And I looked at it and I said, "Yes, your mom has promised me. So we now have a witness here." So they leave. He sort of grumbles and walks out the door. I get a text from him 20 minutes later. And the kid says, "Okay, I'll take the stupid test. Why did you embarrass me that much?" And so here's the thing. This kid, like all kids, he is ambivalent, right? He knew that he wanted another school, or at least wanted that choice, but he also could see this stupid test my mother's making him in this idiot tutor and da-da-da-da, right? And so if we make decisions for kids, then we own them. And we spend all of our energy really telling kids that I know better than you do, which is a terrible, terrible, terrible message. I will also say, in how do we be a non-anxious presence about decisions? Well, because you reside in Silicon Valley, you know much more about this than I, but I'm going to throw a jargon back at you that I've heard from people in your corner role called the pivot. The pivot, right? Which means I have gotten $10 million in venture capital funding and money from friends and family, and things are going terribly. And what do? We pivot and we figure out a plan B. And there are very few people in life who have been on a straight A, a straight and narrow from the Bluebird reading group in first grade all the way through honors, math in seventh grade, into AP classes in high school, to the first choice college of the dream, to graduate school, to Goldman Sachs, to whatever, who never have veered. It's simply not how lives work. And so the older that I've gotten, and Bill's 75, he said, the more and more humble I am about that, I don't know what's in a kid's best interest, because things that look like they're going to be a disaster and can end up being the best thing that ever happened. I mean, I started college, I was top of my high school class, blah, 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 really struggled my first year, just sort of emotionally, and a lot of mental health stuff in my family I won't go into now, maybe later. And I wanted to take a year off. My parents wouldn't let me. So I kind of muddled through, started my second year, finally convinced them to take a year off. Fast forward story. I was on campus when my identical twin brother made an extremely serious attempt at suicide, and I saved his life. And more interestingly, I started dating a young woman with whom I've now been married for 27 years, whom I never would have met if I hadn't taken that year off. We wouldn't be together. So I think a little like the adjustment period, right? So there's a path that we're meant to find our way to. So because when parents sit there, they have this idea, this movie in their mind that this leads to this, leads to this, leads to glory. And if my kids want this leads to this, leads to living in a van down by the river. And it's simply not. I know you're in Silicon Valley and 1 and 0, zeros and ones and binary. And it simply is not the case that this way leads glory and this way is to friggin' perdition. It's not the case. And so for us as parents, all of our fears are about the future, obviously. And, if your kid, loses his best friend in 6th grade or his friend group, you think, my gosh, is he ever going to have friends again? A kid who's really struggling academically, you think, what does this mean about her future? How can she possibly build her life? And I understand those fears. My daughter was school refusal for 3 months, and I've just gotten over the 1-year anniversary of my son having a brain tumor. I've walked this walk, right? And it's not easy. But when we as parents can hold the long view, and especially if you can say the challenges that are currently bedeviling my kid, that these are just part of they're part of their paths. And if I could tell you that no matter what's going on right now, that 3 years or 5 years or 13 years or 25 years from now, your kid is going to be great, you wouldn't worry about it. I spent 3 months of 7th grade in a pediatric psychiatric hospital, long, complicated stuff with my family as my dad drank himself to death. Just a disaster, right? And I have a life that's just as rewarding as anyone that I know, because when I came back from that grand adventure, I knew the life that I wanted. It was not the path that I thought I'd get there, but I knew the life that I wanted. And so for parents, if we can just hold to the long view and even reflect on our own experiences and say, this is okay for them, for this to be sucky for now, in part by knowing that it's the things that are hard, those scars, real or emotional, that are the source of future resilience and our confidence in our ability to get through real stuff. Because all the time we get parents, should I be trying to figure out ways for my kids to struggle? Like, the real world throws enough curveballs at your kid and drops him in the dust when he's at bat. You don't have to engineer stuff, but just don't solve for kids problems that they can solve for themselves. You may need to help them, but don't jump in to solve every little thing. If it's life-threatening, yeah, we jump in the deep end of the pool. But if all they really need is a hand or an attaboy, then we should be the ones who are less anxious. And so that our kids can go out and have things that are fraud adventures. We just want home to feel like a safe base. And so the grown-ups in their lives aren't more stressed out than children are.
Oh, there's so much there that I want to follow on.
Sorry, I give very long answers to simple
No.
questions.
Because you shared so many different things and you've had so many different experiences. And one of the things going through my head, I guess I'll start with one, is what if it's an adult child, right? It seems harder when it's a grown child that
Yeah,
is
it is.
struggling to go on their own, and there are things that you think they should do, or things that take steps that they can be more quote unquote successful.
Right.
Um, and perhaps one of the answers is we need to start now. When, if you have small children, if you already have grown children, I need your answer for
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But how do we manage that and want them to take those steps, right?
So it's an interesting question. So, when you think about, so as parents, we want kids to work hard to get better academically or musically or extracurricularly, whatever. But if we're really honest, we should remind ourselves that what really matters most is not that they work hard, but that they want to work hard. I met yesterday with this lovely family, kid just finished sophomore. I had shared about how this girl had done years of Kumon.
I did it.
And the girl's just, well, dad's like, sort of, and she's rolling her eyes. I'm like, what did you like about it? She's like, I hated it, right? And so all this energy was put into this. And so then dad was asking, well, how much work do I make kids? And you really only make them do an hour of homework a week? Shouldn't they be doing 3 or 4 hours? And so I went on a little bit of a deep dive, but a lot of your listeners have probably read Malcolm Gladwell's book, and probably most of all, The Tipping Point, and Anders Ericsson and the 10,000 hour rule, yada, yada, yada. And I said, and those numbers have been, debunked a tad. I said, but the thing that really was most significant about Anders Ericsson's research, in my view, was not the number of hours, but the nature of the hours. Remember that it wasn't 10,000 hours of practice, particularly under duress. It was 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, right? And so what we want kids is to want to work harder and harder to get better and better at something that matters. Where typically carrots and sticks, we kind of make kids do things. The model for intrinsic motivation is there are 3 psychological needs. I need to feel competent. So I'm good enough. I don't have to feel the best, but I don't want to feel incompetent. I need a sense of relatedness because I work harder for people I care about and people who care about me. And I need a sense of autonomy. And when we as parents jump on kids and force them to do things, we're one, giving the message that they must be incompetent because they have to get better than when they currently are. And then we're really forcing them to go along with us, in which case they give up their autonomy, or fight us, in which case they risk their relatedness. And it's a mixture of 3 chemicals. We need all 3 of these, right? And so this is where we talk about, as a parent trying to be a consultant, and we offer help and we offer advice, right? And we help kids, we encourage them to make their own decisions with language like, listen, it's your call. It'll be your call what we do. I'm not going to force you to do, but I really I want to talk through the pros and cons on this so that you understand my perspective on this. And then we make them, when they make mistakes, solve things for themselves. I'll give you a quick story. I had there's a story in our second book, What Do You Say? Hey, where there was a shameless plug. Bill had a family, and they were Orthodox Jewish, and their boy was supposed to have his bar mitzvah. And if you're a Jewish faith, particularly for Orthodox, this is a really big deal. And this kid didn't want to get bar mitzvahed. And it was this huge source of fighting within their family. And so Bill the mom came to Bill, so what should I do? And we'd just been writing this book about the language of a parent consultant. And she said, I can guess have read your first book. I can guess what you would say. And he said, well, that's right. And so she went to him and said, listen, no one can make you do this. Like, we can't make you memorize your Torah lines. We're going to take up the beam and move your jaw. We couldn't make you do this. But I just want you to understand, that this is a really big deal to your family. This is how we welcome you into Jewish faith. And I respect like crazy that you don't want to do this because you're not really religious and you feel like you'd be a hypocrite. But if you could find a way to go along with this, it would mean a lot to your grandparents and be a lot to us as a family. But it's going to be your call because obviously we couldn't make you do it. And so he thought about it. He came back at the start of the week and he said, all right, I'll do it. But then he negotiated the terms. He didn't want to do it on Saturday when there's a huge attendance. He did it on Monday. And he made a really small group. So it was just the family people who really mattered. And so most things, when they're really strong feelings, when I pull this way, my kid pulls the other way, right? And so we want to negotiate. It just isn't easy because, again, I have, my kid pictures, Mario Andretti, right? And this is going to be amazing, right? And I picture the end of Thelma and Louise, right? And we have very different movies playing in our heads. But yeah, I will tell you, my daughter is brilliant and very rigid. We should at age 19 diagnosed, age 18 diagnosed with autism in ways that were very, very subtle. I'm like, well, that explains a lot. And I've done this for years with her because I want her to be open to what I think might be important. But I also know that the more I push her, the more she'll dig in. And then certainly I'm not winning that argument, right? And I'm also under my relationship with her. And again, I don't want to give her the message that she's making a colossal error in her life, because it's not. I don't know that it's true, and it's rarely a constructive approach to take with young people.
Yeah. That's so hard because I was also going to ask as one of my follow-up
Yeah,
questions,
yeah,
what
yeah,
if it is something that is really important to us, right? And we
yeah,
want to hear no. For example, for me, it is learning Japanese.
yeah,
I want my kids to have that language to be able to
yeah,
speak with their grandparents. And
yeah,
if I'm not with them when they go to Japan, I want them to be able to have that part of their culture. They're half Japanese, so I want them
yeah,
to have that part,
yeah,
But
yeah.
it
I
is
think
absolutely
you.
a struggle.
I think you make. I think you. First of all, you have that conversation when you strike when the iron is cold, right? And if they're fighting and fussing about it, you don't fight. You have to go this day, and you don't fight about it because then they remember the energy. They don't remember your reasons, right? We don't want to have conversations when you're upset and I'm upset because no learning takes place. The learning parts of our brain have gone offline. You also, I think, can negotiate something on this, where you don't have to go every weekend, right? Or we'll try this for 3 months, and then see how it goes, and then we can see if we can re-up on this, right? You can also sometimes, frankly, just use incentives, and you say, listen, I get that this is hard, right? And you're giving up. I mean, and you really, when they say, oh, I should be doing this instead of everybody else is playing basketball, you don't talk them out of it, right? You validate them, say, listen, I get, there are other ways you can be spending Saturday. Your friends are off doing skateboarding, right? And you'd really like to be there. I get that. And I have to say, I'm not wanting to guilt you, but I want to remind you, this is really important to me. And it means a lot to me that you're willing to do this, right? And, if it makes sense, I'm not going to bribe you into doing this, but if it makes sense because you can use rewards in ways that support autonomy. If this is really hard for you to do, I'd be happy to talk about some kind of end of the semester, celebration or break or reward or special dinner, special thing, because I know while you're doing a lot for this, you're also giving up a lot to do this. And I get that. I get that. And so you can support that. But the how of it is always what matters. The other thing that I would say is, there's a wonderful organization that coaches parents of kids, of student athletes, and it's called I Love to Watch You Play. And one of the things, and I think it applies to this and to music and to everything else. And so one of the things that can happen if you are a fluent speaker of Japanese or an expert player of violin or soccer or whatever it happens to be, when you see your kid make a mistake, you have a natural tendency to want to correct it. And you really, 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 really want to be careful on that and leave that to the teacher and remain as mom. So the only real grievance I've had about my wife as a mom is this. My wife is a very, very good musician. Our son is a music major. My daughter has a real spirit for it, but has her father's musical ability. Okay, so see, but Katie was learning violin, and my wife plays in a semi-professional orchestra. And anytime Katie would play something, well, that was terrific. And then my wife would correct her. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please stop. Because I think in my wife's head, if she could get this part better and play it even better, she'd feel more competent, back to that motivation, and feel better about this. But what my daughter was experiencing was a decrease in that relatedness, because mom's now my critic, not my cheerleader, and of autonomy because I'm being told what to do. And the more stressed a kid is, the more low sense of autonomy is really, really injurious. And at some point, my daughter just sort of picked up the violin and just handed it to my daughter and refused to pick it up ever again. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because we could have such joy of playing music as a family, my wife playing beautifully, my daughter playing pretty passively, and me playing on the spoons or something, right? And in some ways that joy was taken away. And my daughter didn't have the interest and maybe not even the skill to really ever be an accomplished musician, but she could enjoy music. So that'd be my advice. If are they taking Japanese right now? And where is
They
that? I
are.
should ask you.
They're
Are they
going to
engaged?
Japanese school, yep, once a week. But your story reminded me, I was teaching them piano. I was like, I
Yeah,
could do basic piano. I could teach
yeah,
them this. And we hired a teacher.
Yeah, yeah,
Being a
yeah.
mom and a teacher is a hard thing.
You can outsource the teaching, but you don't want to outsource being mom, right? And so for me, if they're struggling with it, or you hear them say something wrong or write something wrong, right? You simply ask, hey, do you want me to look over that? Do you want me to correct that? Every student I have who has a parent who's an attorney, invariably, and these are people tend to be just brilliant with writing. I said, do your mom or dad ever correct your paper? And the most typical answer I get is, yeah, once. And they felt so picked on and so picked apart. They're just like, forget it. I'd rather get a bad grade than have that much, right? So all that you want to do, when my kids would ask me to proofread a paper, so what do you want me to correct it for? I can get super nerdy on punctuation. Do you want me to correct the grammar too? If something doesn't make sense, what would you like me to do? And again, I'm being that parent consultant. I'm not being in charge of making them deliver perfect papers,
Yeah. I wouldn't call myself a tiger mom, but I have had to pull back those tiger mom tendencies.
Have you ever read the book?
I have not read. I have
You
not.
should read the book. It is right there on the cover. The ever famous, fabulous, wildly bright, and frankly, very self-aware Amy Chua says, I thought that Eastern parenting was better than Western parenting. And then I was humbled by a 13-year-old. And it's this wonderful story. She actually starts with her daughter at age 5, where she'd sort of beaten her daughter into submission. Her older daughter was just more inclined to go along, as first children often are. And then she has her second daughter, is trying to teach her to play piano, right? And they're sitting there, and the girl's like, and she's like, no, like this. And she takes her hand in 2 fingers or whatever, and the girl's like, and she kind of loses it, picks her up, walks her outside the back stoop of their stair in back of their house, excuse me, New Haven, Connecticut, where she's a professor of law at Yale, and sort of sitting there, and she's scolding her, and she's like, good little girls listen to their mothers, and the girl's sort of giving the stink eye, and she said, are you ready to listen, to go back inside? And the girl crosses her arms and just stands there, and mom's like, well, okay, I can win this game, but it's February and it's 20 degrees. And she's thinking her neighbors are out there looking at it. They're like, here's this professor at Yale sitting there with a 5-year-old in pajamas in 20-degree weather. They're like, we're going to call the freaking police on it. And she relented. And the girl was prepared. Her daughter was prepared to sit there and probably not actually freeze to death, but sure seemed like it was going in that direction. And we just want to remind ourselves of how incredibly important a sense of control is to developing stress tolerance and to be intrinsically motivated. And from our perspective, the two biggest things the 2 things that are most important for children in their developing brains are, 1, a close connection with a parent or other caregiver, and 2, helping kids develop a sense of control over their own lives. And so, you as a parenting expert, all the people who are listening as parents who are both parents and experts, and ideally parenting experts as well, you want your kids to do as well as they can. And we want to help kids have the sense that they can run their own lives. And that's our job, is to help them, including making all the mistakes that go along their way. And so particularly if you have kids who are not yet in high school, where the grades don't matter a fig and the homework doesn't matter at all, invest in your relationship with them and in their feeling as in control of things as possible. For all the parents, like, I've got to go home and make sure my kid does her homework in 4th grade. I'm like, how did that become your job? I mean, whose problem is it? It's her homework to do. It's your job as a parent to offer help. It's not your job to make sure your kid does her homework.
And I love a few things that you said. One is, or this is how I interpreted it, but we need to let them make the mistakes now, especially if we have younger ones, right? Because they don't count it. I shouldn't say they don't count much now, but they learn from that, and hopefully they apply that, and they don't have to learn how to make those mistakes when they're an adult, right? These are the skills we want to give them, these life skills that are just hard to just teach. They have to learn on their own.
Well, that's the thing, is parents so often, we think about consequences, right? And what so often we do as parents, because we're anxious and we love our kids and we want to protect them, is we protect them from natural consequences, meaning things that happen if we weren't anywhere within even in the same hemisphere. And then we inflict upon them logical consequences, meaning that I'm now the disciplinarian. And what we really want to do is work on our own stress and not protect kids from natural consequences, because those are the things that they learn from most, because they have no one to blame except for themselves. When I start, lecturing or instilling inflicting or logical consequences, then they can blame me, feel that it's somehow my fault rather than the thing that the child has done themselves. And it's very wrongheaded.
And there's so many things to learn from that, right? Not just decision-making skills, but also coping skills of how do you deal with things that didn't turn out the way that you wanted. So I think that's
Right.
fantastic point. And I think you were also basically saying, enjoy your kid. We had talked about this before, right? It really comes down to enjoying our kids. And I think that can apply to spouses too.
Oh my goodness. I was given a talk about our second book, What Do You Say, at a local school. And this mom came up to me, a Black mom, African-American mom. This will be important in a moment. And she said, I bought your book at the start of COVID. And I read it, and I determined that the fourth chapter of the book is called A Non-Anxious Presence. And I committed myself to making home feel like a safe base. And she said, if you can remember back to the summer of 2020, this was not only COVID and all of that uncertainty, but it was also the summer of George Floyd, when it felt like America, not only was this global pandemic taking out, threatening all of us, but it felt like America was hunting people who looked like my son, teenage Black boys. Right. And she said, and so it felt scary everywhere. And I determined that I was going to make at least home feel like this was safe and we were in this together. And she said, it completely transformed my relationship with my kid. And so you read the statistics on, the CDC study that came out in November of research based on November of 2021, when full 10% of American teens made an attempted suicide. And if you know that if there's a silver bullet against the effects on stress on developing brains, it's a close connection with a parent and another caregiver. Or for us, if you've got a partner or a spouse, the closeness of that connection, that's the single best determinant of whether people who are struggling with mental health come out of that into a healthier place or get worse and worse. And so it's not easy, because when things aren't going well, I mean, my daughter in 8th grade, full school refusal. I'm a guy who helps people get into college. What's going in my head, right? And we went out for a walk, and she was just, oh man, I mean, everything was hard. She never had friends in school and just everything. And and I looked at her with the best courage I could muster. And I said, listen, I said, I am confident. I never say no, because you can't say that, right? Because I don't know that. I said, I'm confident that your life is going to work out great. I said, you are creative as all get out. You're smart as a tack. You're funny and kind. And I said, you're going to have really good friends, and you're going to do cool things in this world. And she said, it sure doesn't feel that way. And I said, I know it doesn't feel that way, because right now, this is all hard. And I don't like to pull the I'm older than you are, but I've gone through the sun a few more times than you have. And from what I can see, you have everything in you that you need to have a wonderful life. And we just have to figure out how. And that's my job as your dad, is to help you figure out how you're going to do it. Hard conversation, right? But particularly when things are hard, if we can do our best to say, this sucks for now, and I have every reason to think it will get better somehow. And that's what we're going to work on together, kiddo. But it's, when you've got a kid or a spouse, when things aren't easy, it's not easy. And we are allowed to be worried about this. But so much of our energy has to be working on ourselves, because it's so helpful and so important to our little kids or to our spouses who may not yet be able to figure things out for themselves.
I love that. Love that. And we could be talking for hours. There's so much here.
Yeah.
But I'd love to leave our moms with a quick action or challenge that they can take today to start making changes, and then ask about how it went, or just wins, all of that.
Yep.
Share your challenge.
And so one thing I want to be really clear that in our books, I never want to blame a parent for mistakes that they've made or things that they're beating themselves up about, because the only perfect parents are people who don't have children yet, and so for the rest of us, right? There's the rest of us, right? And so we're all doing our best. But I want to share this. There's something called the writing reflex, the writing reflex. And it's simply the idea that if I tell you about a problem, or you tell me about a problem, or your child or my child, right? Anybody whom we care about, even maybe for people we don't, when they tell us about a problem, our brain goes into the writing reflex, meaning we start trying to think about what the solution is. Well, we could do this or this or this or that, or try saying, well, it's really not that big a deal, whatever. But when I say, Amy, you should do, what about this or this or this? If you're in the middle of just being, oh my gosh, about this, it feels like, well, if only you'd done this, you dope, you wouldn't be here. Like anybody, like I could see that. And you're like, oh my, are you kidding me, Ned? Right? Or, oh my God, Amy, really, seriously, in 3 months, you never liked that person anyway. It feels to you like I'm telling you, you shouldn't be feeling the way that you're feeling. And both of those things are really invalidating. So the chapters, I'll put together 2 chapters from What Do You Say? This first chapter is about using empathy and validation to create close connection. And then the second chapter is the language of a parent consultant. So when your kid comes home and they got cut from the soccer team, or their friend was mean to them, or they bombed a test that you thought they studied hard for, or they didn't study at all for, right? And instead of jumping into doing this, you simply go, oh man, I'm so sorry. So if your kid comes home and is bombed, I worked so hard on that test. I studied like crazy and it just went terribly. And you're like, study, buddy, dude. You were like watching NBA until 11 o'clock at night. You were in 7th grade. I told you, whatever, right? Or, oh my gosh, it's only one test. Don't worry about this. You'll make it. It's the end of the year. Who even cares? What you do is simply said, oh my goodness, empathy. Oh my God, you're sure upset about that, huh? Validation. You have a reason to think this. Validation. I'd be upset too if I felt like I studied like crazy, and it hadn't gone well. Note, I didn't agree with the facts. I didn't agree with the facts. I just said, I'd be upset too if I felt that way, right? Or my friends were so mean to you. Well, what did you say to them first? Oh my gosh, I'd be upset too if someone said that to me. And what that does is it lowers the emotional charge. And then what we do as a consultant for any situations of problem, say, you use this validation, say, I got a suggestion on that. Would you like to hear it now, or is this not a good time? And because this shows respect and gives kids a sense of control, it lowers their defensiveness and makes them much more likely to open and say, now's really not the time, Mom. Totally get it. Totally get it. And if they walk up to the room, if they want to go there, do you want to keep talking about this? Do you want time alone? And all we're trying to do is to change the energy. And the last one I'll say, and it's the same tool applied to homework, because most moms get fallen because they're typically more organized, or it's all kinds of reasons, right? Often find themselves feeling responsible for their kids' homework. And especially if you've got a kid who's not motivated, or a kid for learning is hard, a kid who's ADHD, you get the teacher's tone. You got to make sure that Ned does, oh, stop with that. Here's what you do. If you've got a kid where homework is always wobbly, here's the thing to try today. When they come home, there are 3 questions you ask them. 1, hey, do you got a plan for what you need to get done? Full stop. You don't ask to see the plan. If they want to offer the plan, let it know. But do you have a plan? You do? Fantastic, right? Question 2, is there anything on that I can help you with? Anything you'd like me to look over or sit beside you while you do it? Yes, happy to do it. And then do exactly what you've been asked to do. If they say, no, I got it, Mom, great. Third question, is it okay if I check in at a couple hours and just see if there's anything you need help with in case something pops up? That's it. And what we're doing is making ourselves available, making it clear to our kid that we know this homework is valuable, but also saying that I'm not responsible for it, but I'm here to help you in any way that I can. Because so many children, especially where learning is hard, they resist doing the work, and they resist what's in their own best interest, meaning listen to mom or dad's help on this. So, hey, do you got a plan for this? Can I help you with anything? Is it okay for me to check in at a couple hours? And I shared this with a parent who's actually a business consultant who'd been fighting with his kid for ever. And mom and dad were collectively reminding him like 15 times a day. Got an email back from him. Dad said, I don't know if it was today or maybe your advice, but I had the best conversation with my son that I've had on this possibly ever. And it doesn't always work that way, but it was one conversation for 3 minutes. And this is a kid who's lovely, but very ADHD and needs a lot of help. So that'd be the thing to try to do tonight.
I love that. I am looking forward to hearing what happens for people.
Me too. If it doesn't work, blame Amy.
Oh yeah.
I'm teasing.
And I know you have a fabulous gift for everyone. Can you share where it is and how people can connect with you further?
Yeah. So it's on our, golly, is that going to be on your website or our website? Are you sending this out in the link?
I'll provide a link. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Good. I'm glad everyone's more organized than I'm. So basically it's a link of the top 10 tips, Cliff Notes, this Spark Notes, as it were, the ChatGPT notes of our second book, What Do You Say? And it's kind of 10 tips of things to try, kind of the big takeaway from the various chapters that are in there. And so I hope that it helps people. We have a couple of friends, one of actually psychologists, and has this, she has it on her mirror in her bathroom, and she reads it every single day to remind her of because all of these things are, it's so easy to fall into our natural tendencies of how we want to help kids, of how we want to help our spouse, of how we want to help our friends. It's just that our well-meaning intentions don't always work out the way that we'd hope they would. And so some of the advice that we offer feels a little counterintuitive, but can be powerful in ways. And so I hope that people start with that. If you have time, pick up the book and read a little bit more deeply. But thank you for the opportunity to share those things. And thank you for this conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
You too. And where can people find you on socials or
so I'm on Twitter. I'm Ned Johnson on Twitter, and I'm on TikTok at the other Ned Johnson. I made this ridiculous TikTok about procrastination, something called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, about the last minute kid that went a little viral, I guess. And so I'm courting my kids. I'm TikTok famous, so I will get back to that and post some stuff. But yeah, it's the other Ned Johnson.
The other Ned Johnson. Got it. Yeah. Now I'm wondering who the original Ned Johnson is.
The founder of Fidelity. So only thing that separates maybe him and me is a few decades and a few $1 billion. So
yeah. Got it. Well, that is absolutely fabulous. And I have read the book and it's amazing. So everybody should go check that out. Thank you, Ned, again, for sharing such great information with us. And be sure to come back for more amazing summit speakers. Thank you, everyone.